People in St. Augustine Parish still whisper about the fire of 1856. They say the flames did not destroy the convent. They revealed it. Because when the east wing of the convent of Our Lady of Sorrows burned that night, the smoke carried out more than old wood and broken prayers. It carried secrets. Secrets written in ledgers the church never meant anyone to see. Secrets worth exactly $200 each. And once those secrets came to light, nothing in southern Louisiana ever felt holy again. Part 1. The girl named Ruth. $200. That number was stamped on every birth certificate the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy issued between 1842 and 1856. The parish believed it was a donation for charity, a Christian offering to help a child from a sad past find a better home. Plantation families paid it with pride. They believed they were buying a blessing. They never asked where the babies came from. They never imagined the truth. Street. Augustine Parish sat along the slow brown water of the Atchafalaya River. The cypress trees leaned over the banks like tired guardians, their moss hanging low enough to brush the surface. The land around the river was rich and dark. 11 sugar plantations covered the area. 23 slave quarters, 2 cotton gins, and 1 Catholic convent. The convent of Our Lady of Sorrows stood on 80 acres donated decades earlier by the Devereux family, a wealthy family whose name everyone knew. The sisters arrived from France in 1808 and brought with them strict rules, silent halls, and the belief that suffering could be holy. Mother Superior Celeste Beaumont ruled the convent with the discipline of an army captain. She wrote down everything: the cost of candles, the weight of vegetables, the number of prayers said. People admired her seriousness, even feared it. The other sisters rarely spoke in public. They kept to themselves and to God. The parish believed the sisters lived lives of pure devotion. They ran a school. They sold vegetables and laundry services. They offered adoptions to wealthy Catholic families who longed for children. Everyone trusted them. No one questioned what happened behind the brick walls topped with sharp iron. But inside those walls lived something darker than anyone imagined. The truth began with a girl named Ruth. She arrived in April 1841. Though arrived makes it sound like she came by choice. Ruth was 19. She belonged to Charles Devereux, the grandson of the family who had donated the land the convent stood on. She had been born enslaved on his plantation. Her mother had died when Ruth was 12. She had lived in the quarters all her life. Charles had a problem that spring. His wife, Amelie, had noticed the signs of pregnancy. Not her own, but Ruth's. Amelie had been raised by nuns. She knew what it meant. She also knew what it said about her husband. She did not confront him. A lady did not embarrass her husband. Instead, she offered him a solution that looked like charity but felt like punishment. She told Charles the convent needed extra hands. The donation would honor their family. And Ruth would be out of sight. Charles agreed. He was only too relieved to be rid of the evidence of his actions. He took Ruth to the convent on a warm April morning. The dogwoods were blooming. The air smelled of honeysuckle and river mud. Mother Superior Beaumont met him at the door. Her face showed no surprise. No sympathy. Nothing. She accepted Ruth with a calm nod. "We will put her to good use in the service of God," she said. Ruth stood quietly between them, her hands resting over the small swell of her stomach. She wore a simple house servant's dress and a faded cloth wrapped around her hair. She said nothing. She had learned to make herself invisible. It kept her alive. Charles left without looking at her. She never saw him again. Mother Superior took Ruth through the convent, past the silent dining hall, past the chapel where candles flickered before statues of saints, past the schoolroom, past the vegetable garden where 3 sisters worked with their heads bowed. Then they reached a building Ruth had not noticed earlier. A long low structure with small windows and a heavy locked door. "This is the penitent house," Mother Superior said, "where women reflect on their sins and earn forgiveness through work." She unlocked the door and led Ruth down a narrow hallway. The smell inside was sharp. Soap, sweat, and something else. Something metallic. Something like blood. Mother Superior opened a small cell on the left. Just a bed, a table, a chamber pot, a wooden cross. "You will sleep here," she said. "You will wake at 4:30. You will work in the fields until noon. Then in the laundry until 6. You will speak only when necessary. You will pray constantly for the salvation of your soul. When your time comes, Sister Marie-Therese will attend your labor. Afterward you will return to work. Your child will be given to a good Christian family. This is God's mercy." Ruth looked up. The Mother Superior's eyes were cold gray winter water. "Do you understand?" Ruth nodded. "Say yes, Mother Superior." "Yes, Mother Superior. Disobedience will be corrected through prayer. Severe disobedience will be corrected through other means." Ruth said yes again. Mother Superior left, locking the door behind her. Ruth stood alone. She placed her hand on her belly. She wondered what kind of mercy lived in this place. She did not know that hundreds of women had asked the same question. She did not know she would soon learn answers that would haunt her. The bell woke her the next morning in complete darkness. She heard other doors opening. Footsteps. A soft cough. A child crying for a moment before silence swallowed it. When Sister Josephine opened Ruth's door and handed her a rough gray work dress, Ruth realized she was not alone. In the dim morning light she saw 5 other women. All young, all pregnant, all silent. They followed the sister to the fields behind the convent. 20 acres of cotton, hidden from the road by live oaks. The parish believed the sisters hired workers. They did not know the truth. These women worked the fields. Every morning, every evening, 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year. Ruth joined them, and with every step she took through the cold morning dew, she felt something deep inside her growing stronger than fear. A question: what happens to the babies? She would soon learn the answer. And the answer would cost $200. If you want, I can continue with part 2, match the same tone, and keep it around 1,000 words. Engaging hook. Some secrets can be buried. Some can be burned, but the ones built on suffering always find their way back to the light. In the convent of Our Lady of Sorrows, where faith was supposed to heal the broken, another truth lived beneath the prayers. A truth made of stolen children, broken women, and a silence so heavy it felt like chains. Ruth had survived her first months inside those walls, but now she was about to learn the deeper horror. The convent did not only take babies. It took futures. It took hope. It took the very idea of freedom. And part 2 is where Ruth discovers just how far the sisters would go to keep their holy business alive. Part 2. Ruth moved between the tall rows of cotton plants, sweat dripping down her neck as the morning sun pushed through the gray sky. Her hands were quick and experienced, but her body still felt weak from giving birth only weeks earlier. Each bend sent a sharp ache through her abdomen. Each stretch of her fingers reminded her of the child who would never know her touch again. Sister Josephine patrolled the edge of the field, holding the brass bell she rang whenever someone slowed even a little. The bell was small, but its sound cut through the air like a warning. No woman dared fall behind. Ruth understood the rhythm of this place now. Obey, work, pray, suffer, repeat. When the noon bell rang, the women walked silently back to the penitent house. They ate beans and cornbread with heads low. Only the shuffle of feet and the scrape of spoons filled the air. The youngest girl, Lydia, managed a small glance toward Ruth. Their eyes met, but she quickly looked away. No one wanted to be caught stealing moments of connection. Even compassion felt dangerous here. After the short rest, they moved to the laundry house. Steam rose in thick white clouds from boiling copper pots. The heat inside wrapped around the women like a heavy blanket. Ruth scrubbed linens until her hands burned. Lye bit into her skin, reopening tiny cuts from the cotton fields. The water smelled of soap and smoke and sweat. The work felt endless. But the laundry house was also where whispers lived. The sisters did not watch as closely here. Between the sloshing of water and the scrape of boards, the women shared pieces of themselves. A name, a memory, a fear, a warning. Ruth learned them slowly. She learned that Hannah had been here the longest. She learned that Clara had once dreamed of escaping north. She learned that Dinah hummed hymns under her breath to keep her mind sane. She learned that Naomi prayed each night for her child, stolen 2 summers before. Ruth learned that no one here was at the convent by choice. And Ruth learned the number that lived in all their minds. $200. $200 paid by plantation families for the charitable adoptions. $200 exchanged for a life. For a baby. For a future ripped from its mother's arms. The realization broke something inside Ruth, something she had kept hidden even from herself. Her child, Thomas, had been sold as easily as a barrel of sugar or a heap of cotton. Wrapped in white cloth, baptized, and handed away before she even healed. That night, Ruth lay awake in her narrow bed. The room was dark, but she could hear breathing through the thin walls. Soft cries. A sharp gasp from someone dreaming. A low moan from pain. All the sounds of women whose bodies had been used as tools. She placed her hand on her stomach, remembering the weight of her son. The warmth of him, his small fist curling around her finger. She whispered to the darkness, more prayer than thought, I will not let them break me. The next morning, the women followed the same routine. Field, meal, laundry, silence. But something changed that afternoon when Ruth overheard chatter drifting from the courtyard window of the laundry house. Mother Superior Beaumont was speaking with Father Dufresne. Their voices were smooth and polite, meant for conversation among equals. The Robichaud family was most pleased, Mother Superior said. They increased their donation by 50%. A truly blessed gift. God rewards those who serve him, Father Dufresne replied. And the good work here continues. These orphans would have suffered greatly without your care. Ruth froze. Her hands remained submerged in the soapy water, but everything inside her went cold. Orphans. They called them orphans. As if the mothers were not 20 yards away. As if they had died. As if their children had not been taken. Clara, next to her, paused in her scrubbing. Their eyes met for the first time with a shared understanding. A shared anger. That night after supper, Ruth took a risk. She whispered to Hannah while Sister Josephine stepped into the kitchen. How long have you been here? Hannah wiped her mouth quickly, as if she had not spoken at all. Her voice barely existed. 5 years. Maybe 6. I delivered 3 children here. Ruth felt the breath leave her chest. 3. Gone, Hannah whispered. All gone. The sisters call it mercy, but it feels like death. Ruth swallowed the pain in her throat. Why did they do it? Hannah lifted her eyes, and in them Ruth saw something like knowledge, something like resignation. Our bodies make money. For the masters. For the sisters. For the church. As long as we can work, they keep us. When we can no longer work, they send us back to the plantations. Or worse. Ruth felt the walls of the room closing in, the ceiling lowering, the air tightening. She could not speak. She could barely breathe. The next weeks brought more births. Lydia delivered a girl who cried every night until she was taken away. Clara delivered twins, a boy and a girl. The Robichaud family paid $350 for the pair. The sisters celebrated by ringing the chapel bell. Ruth heard it echo across the courtyard, cheerful and bright. She hated the sound. Ruth's strength slowly returned, her steps firmer and her mind sharper. But with strength came anger. And with anger came a dangerous thought. This place pretended to be holy. But it was built on suffering. Built on lies. Built on the stolen futures of women like her. One night, as Ruth lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she heard something unusual. A soft knock at her door. A whisper. Ruth, you awake? It was Hannah. Ruth sat up. Yes. Hannah hesitated, then said the words that would shape everything to come. I think there is a way to prove what they are doing. But we must be careful. Very careful, because if the sisters find out we are talking, they will punish us in ways you cannot imagine. Ruth felt her pulse quicken. And yet, hope crept into her heart like a spark. What do you mean? Hannah looked at her through the darkness. The Mother Superior keeps records. Ledgers. Names. Dates. Where each baby is sent. If we can find them, maybe someone outside will believe us. Maybe someone will help. Ruth's breath caught. For the first time since entering the convent, she felt the faint stir of something she had not dared allow herself to feel. Possibility. And it was enough to keep her awake long after Hannah slipped back to her room. Enough to make her whisper into the darkness again. I will not break. If you want part 3, just say, continue with part 3. Part 3, the girl who asked too many questions. Engaging hook. People say evil hides best behind holy walls. Ruth once believed that church buildings could not hold darkness. But now she knew better. And far away, another girl was about to discover the same truth. A girl with education, courage, and too much curiosity for her own safety. The kind of curiosity that wakes ancient secrets and brings danger to anyone who listens. Part 3. Ruth sat beside Hannah in the dim dining room, the lantern light flickering over their tired faces. The beans in Ruth's bowl were turning cold. She kept staring at them, trying not to think about the babies taken in the night or the silent women who worked until their bodies broke. The penitent house had changed her. The quiet cruelty of the sisters, the cries heard through the walls, the way hope dried up like river mud in August. All of it pressed heavily on her heart. Hannah's voice pulled her back. 5 years. Since I was 18. Ruth looked at her, confused. 5 years of what? Hannah understood her confusion. She swallowed hard before continuing. 5 years since I was sent here. Do you ever think about leaving? Ruth expected Hannah to laugh, maybe even dream for a moment. But Hannah's laugh came out sharp and painful. Where would I go? I am property of the Theriot family. They sent me here. If I run, they will find me and it will be worse. Ruth opened her mouth to speak, but Hannah continued in a hushed voice. At least here I am fed. At least here I am not ordered into the master's room every night. She stopped talking, but Ruth felt the ache in every unspoken word. But the children, Ruth's voice cracked. Don't you want to know where they are? Of course I do. Hannah pressed her fingers to her eyes. I want to know if they are safe. If they are being taught to read. If anyone tells them I am their mother. She shook her head slowly. But wanting does nothing here. This is how it is. This is how it will always be. Ruth felt her throat tighten. Maybe Hannah was right. The system was too big, too protected by powerful men. The church called it charity. The masters called it useful. The sisters called it redemption. But something inside Ruth refused to accept it. There had to be a way to stop this. To expose it. To make someone listen. There was only one problem. Ruth could not read or write. None of the women here could. That was not an accident. It was the quiet strategy of powerful people who wanted secrets to stay buried. Illiterate women could not write letters. They could not keep records. They could not defend themselves. But someone could. Someone outside these walls. Someone young, educated, curious, and already suspicious. Someone named Marguerite Bellamy. Marguerite was 17, the daughter of Dr. Jean-Baptiste Bellamy, physician to wealthy families across St. Augustine Parish. She attended the convent school, where the sisters taught girls polite skills and polite thinking. But Marguerite was different. She had a sharp mind. She asked the kinds of questions that made adults restless. She had noticed something strange back in January of 1842. It began on a cold morning when she arrived early for her lesson. The courtyard was quiet, the sun barely touching the old brick walls. That was when she saw Sister Marie-Therese. The sister was moving quickly, almost running, clutching a white bundle. Her eyes darted around as if she expected someone to step out of the shadows. Marguerite stepped forward. You are early, Miss Bellamy, Sister Marie-Therese said. Marguerite apologized, but her eyes fixed on the bundle. She heard a muffled sound coming from it. A baby cry. Marguerite leaned in. Is that a baby? Sister Marie-Therese tightened her grip. One of our charitable cases. This child is going to a family in New Orleans. God provides Christian homes for the abandoned. Where did the baby come from? The sister's expression changed. Her voice turned cold. That is not proper conversation for young ladies. She ordered Marguerite to the music room. Marguerite went, but the moment sank deep into her mind and stayed there like a pebble in a shoe. Over the next few months, she noticed more. The women working far behind the convent grounds. The locked door of the penitent house that no student was allowed near. The frequency of charitable adoptions announced in church bulletins. Sometimes 2 or 3 a month. Then in May, her father mentioned something disturbing during dinner. Charles Devereux sent one of his house servants to the convent. She is pregnant. They want her to work until she gives birth. After that the sisters will arrange an adoption. Marguerite stopped eating. They send pregnant servants to the convent. Apparently this is common, her father said. Masters do not want pregnant servants visible. The convent needs workers. After the baby is born, the child goes to another family. Everyone benefits. Everyone benefits. The words haunted Marguerite. Who benefited? Certainly not the women. Certainly not the babies taken from them. She watched more closely during her twice-weekly lessons. She counted the women she saw from a distance. There were always between 6 and 9. Always quiet, always tired. She noticed babies carried out in white bundles. Always by Sister Marie-Therese. Always quickly, always quietly. Then in July, she did something bold. She slipped away from her lesson early and walked to the penitent house. She knew she was not supposed to be there, but her curiosity had become heavier than her fear. The door was locked, but she heard movement inside. A woman humming a lullaby. A baby crying softly. Miss Bellamy. The voice behind her made her jump. Mother Superior stood only a few feet away. Her face calm, her eyes cold. You are lost, she said. Marguerite tried to smile, pretending confusion. I was looking for the privy. The privy is in the opposite direction. This building is not for visitors. See that you do not become confused again. The warning was clear. That same week, Marguerite was told the school would close for August. When September came, she received a letter from the convent. They would no longer accept students over 16. Older girls should prepare for marriage at home. It was a polite way of saying, do not return. Her father brushed off her concerns. The sisters run a respectable institution. Do not embarrass the family again. But Marguerite could not forget what she had seen. In November she made a dangerous choice. She wrote a letter to the bishop in New Orleans. She described everything she had witnessed. She signed her name. She sent it with a trusted family friend. 2 weeks later her father came home from a meeting with Father Dufresne. He looked furious. You wrote to the bishop? He shouted. You accuse the sisters of evil. Do you know the scandal this could cause? Did the bishop investigate? Marguerite whispered. Her father slammed his hand on the table. The bishop spoke with Mother Superior. She said everything is proper. She helps fallen women. She arranges charitable adoptions. They are offended you question them. I assured them it will not happen again. Marguerite stared at him. But Papa, if you would only look. Enough. You will not speak of this again. Do you understand? Marguerite understood something else entirely. She understood that truth had enemies. She understood that the church protected itself. She understood that enslaved women's suffering was invisible to everyone who wanted to stay blind. And somewhere far away, inside the penitent house, Ruth sat in darkness, whispering a name she had never heard. Marguerite Bellamy, the girl who might be the only chance they had. If you'd like, I can write part 4 next, with the same style and length. Part 4, The Door That Should Never Open. Engaging hook. Everyone in St. Augustine Parish believed the convent was peaceful and holy. They believed the sisters prayed all day and helped the poor. But behind the stone walls of the penitent house there was a door no one talked about. A door that stayed locked in every season. A door that even the bravest sister avoided after sunset. Ruth always wondered what was behind it. In part 4 she finally discovers the truth. And the truth is far more terrifying than she ever imagined. Part 4. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky was clear and silver with fading evening light. The next moment thunder rolled across the fields and rain poured down like a waterfall. The women in the penitent house had just finished their supper when a loud crack shook the walls. The lanterns flickered. Water dripped through the roof and hit the floor in cold splashes. Sister Josephine entered the room with her usual stiff posture. Her eyes looked even, sharper in the dim light. There is to be no talking. There is to be no wandering. Remain in your beds until the bell rings in the morning. She left, locking the door behind her. The women lay down quietly. But Ruth could not sleep. The storm outside matched the storm inside her chest. Every day she felt the weight of what she had learned. Every day the fear grew stronger. Marguerite Bellamy had tried to expose the convent. The bishop ignored her. Her father silenced her. The church shut its doors to the truth. And the sisters continued their cruel work. Ruth kept thinking about the babies leaving in white bundles. She kept thinking about Hannah's 3 children. She kept thinking about Lydia's tear-stained face every night. Something inside Ruth refused to accept that this was the end of their story. Lightning flashed outside. For a moment the whole room turned white. The next second darkness returned. A soft cry came from the far corner of the dormitory. It was not a woman crying. It was a small sound. A baby. A real baby. Ruth sat up slowly. Her heart thudded in her chest. Another flash of lightning lit the room. Hannah sat on her mattress, her arms wrapped tightly around a tiny bundle. The child was no more than a day old. Ruth crawled toward her. "Whose is it?" Hannah shook her head. "Clara gave birth this morning. She is still bleeding. They took the baby away minutes after. But I heard the child crying in the hallway when I was returning from the washroom. The sisters forgot to lock the storeroom because of the storm. I found the baby lying in a basket on the table. They were getting ready to take her away at sunrise." Ruth stared at the newborn. The baby was beautiful with soft curls and dark eyes that blinked slowly. The child trusted Hannah completely, even though the world around her was cruel and cold. Ruth whispered, "What are you going to do?" Hannah let out a shaky breath. "I do not know, but I could not leave her there alone. They say these children go to good homes. But how can they be good when they tear them away from their mothers? Clara will never see her again." The storm grew louder. The wind pushed against the old wooden windows. Ruth looked at the sleeping women around them. She knew this was dangerous. If the sisters discovered the baby, Hannah would be punished. Ruth would be punished, maybe worse. But something else caught her attention. A faint sound coming from below the floor. A sound like someone moaning. A cry, then another. Not a storm sound, not an animal, human. Hannah's eyes widened. "You hear it too?" Ruth nodded. "Where is it coming from?" The sound grew. Slow, weak, almost like a woman calling from inside the walls. Hannah whispered, "Not all babies leave, Ruth. Some mothers do not survive the birth. Sometimes the sisters say they are too sick to live. Sometimes they never return to the dormitory." Ruth felt the hairs rise on her arms. "You mean they are down there?" Hannah nodded again. "They say the basement is where they keep the women who cannot work anymore. Some call it the sick ward. I call it something else." The moan echoed again. The storm covered it, but only a little. Ruth stood up slowly. The room was dark except for lightning. "We have to see." Hannah clutched the baby tighter. "Ruth, no one goes down there. The door stays locked every day of the year." Ruth made her voice firm. "Locked doors still have keys." She looked at the wall where the sisters usually hung their belts and prayer ropes. But tonight the hallway had been rushed. The storm had caused chaos. The keys were not in their normal place. A loud crash shook the entire house. The women woke up in fright. Sister Josephine's voice shouted from outside. "Stay in your rooms. Storm damage in the chapel. No one move." Her footsteps hurried away. Ruth felt her chance. The storm had pulled the sisters away. For the first time in months there was no watchful eye on the penitent house. Ruth turned to Hannah. "Give me the child." Hannah hesitated, then gently placed the newborn into Ruth's arms. Ruth tucked the baby close to her body and wrapped cloth around her small face so the rain would not reach her. Ruth whispered, "I will not let anything happen to her." Hannah nodded. "I will follow you." Ruth moved to the back of the room where an old wooden door stood. It was the door to the stairway that led to the basement. Ruth touched the iron handle. It was cold. The metal felt alive under her fingers. She turned the handle. It clicked. Unlocked. She pushed the door open. A wave of cold air rushed out. The smell hit her first. Heavy. Damp. Like forgotten earth and wet stone. Like sickness. Like sorrow. The stairs were narrow. The darkness felt endless. Hannah whispered behind her. "Do you see anything?" "Only shadows." Ruth stepped onto the first step. It creaked loudly. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. She took another step. And another. Thunder boomed overhead. The wind screamed against the building. Ruth reached the bottom. She turned slowly. And what she saw made her choke on her own breath. The basement was filled with beds. Not beds really. More like wooden boards with thin blankets. Women lay on them. Pale. Thin. Some barely breathing. Some not moving at all. Their eyes stared at nothing. Their bodies looked abandoned by the world. One woman whispered, "Help us." Another whispered, "They forgot us." Ruth stepped back, horrified. What happened to them? A voice came from the far corner. A woman old enough to be a grandmother. Her eyes burned with pain and anger. This is where they send the ones who cannot work. They call it rest. It is not rest. It is where they leave us to die. Ruth held the baby closer. How long have you been here? The woman whispered. Long enough to know the truth. The sisters are not angels. They are merchants. They trade in mothers. They trade in babies. And they trade in silence. Ruth felt her body go cold. The newborn squirmed against her chest. Hannah took a step forward. We cannot stay here. Someone will hear us. But Ruth was frozen. Her mind raced. How deep did this cruelty go? How many women had suffered here? How many children had disappeared forever? Then Ruth heard footsteps upstairs. Not sisters. Not women. Men. Deep voices. Rough voices. Angry voices. One of them said, Mother Superior wants the baby delivered tonight. Before the roads flood. Ruth's blood turned to ice. They were coming for the newborn. And they were coming now. If you want, I can continue with part 5 in the same style and length. Part 5. The Night of the Whispering Walls. Hook. Some nights carry a silence so heavy that it feels like the world is holding its breath. But in the old Bradford house, silence was never empty. It was alive. It listened. It waited. And on the night Eleanor decided to confront the truth, that silence finally spoke back. Eleanor stood in the middle of the hallway, staring at the locked wooden door at the end. The same door that had haunted her dreams for weeks. The same door her mother had warned her about on her deathbed. The same door that seemed to breathe whenever she passed it. The house around her felt colder now, as if it knew what she was planning to do. She held the small brass key in her hand. It had been found behind the loose brick in the cellar wall. Someone had hidden it, but someone else had tried very hard to find it. The scratch marks on the brick proved that. Why did they bury a key instead of destroying it? Why did they fear the door so much? Her candle flickered as she walked. The flame rose and fell like it was trying to warn her. Shadows moved along the ceiling even though nothing else moved. Eleanor took a deep breath and forced her legs to move. She told herself she would only look. Just one moment. She would not step inside. When she reached the door, she felt a pressure on the back of her neck. It felt like someone was standing behind her, watching her, waiting for her to fail. She turned around quickly, but the hallway was empty. Only the long carpet and the old portraits on the walls stared back at her. Portraits of people who had lived in the house long before her. People who never smiled. She lifted the key toward the lock, but her hand began to shake. A whisper traveled across the hallway. A single word. A name. Her name. She froze and listened. Nothing. Only silence. But she felt the whisper inside her bones. She pushed the key into the lock. Before she could turn it, she heard footsteps rushing from the far end of the hallway. She spun around just as Mr. Harland, the caretaker, stopped in front of her. His hair was wild, his shirt was half untucked, and his eyes looked like he had been running for hours. Do not open it, he said, breathing heavily. You do not understand what waits behind that door. Eleanor stepped back. You know about it. You have always known. Everyone who served this family knew, he answered. This door is not meant for the living. Eleanor felt the anger rise in her chest. Then why did you never tell me? Why did my mother hide it? Why did everyone pretend nothing was wrong? Mr. Harland lowered his head. Because the house chooses who it tells. And it chose you. Before Eleanor could respond, a loud knock came from the other side of the door. A slow, heavy knock, like a hand made of stone had struck the wood. Eleanor felt her heart stop. Mr. Harland grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the door. It is awake, he said. And it knows you are here. The knocking came again, then again, faster. Eleanor covered her ears as the entire hallway vibrated. Even the portraits on the walls shook. Mr. Harland held her firmly. You must leave the house now. Before it decides to open itself. Eleanor pulled her arm away. No, I need to know. I need to understand what this house did to my family. My mother suffered because of this thing. I will not run from it. Mr. Harland stared into her eyes. His fear was real, but her determination was stronger. He turned aside and whispered, Then may God help you. Because once you see what is behind that door, you will never be the same. The vibrations stopped. Everything became silent. Too silent. Eleanor stepped forward again, ignoring his trembling hands reaching out to stop her. She placed her fingers on the doorknob. It was warm now, almost like a human hand. The portraits on the walls seemed to tilt toward her. The candle flame grew tall and thin. A strange pressure filled the hallway like the air was thickening around her. She turned the key. When the lock clicked, the temperature dropped. Her breath turned white. The light dimmed. A long low moan rose from the other side of the door. It sounded like centuries of suffering pushed into a single voice. Eleanor pushed the door open. Inside was a small square room with stone walls. No windows. No furniture. Only a single wooden chair sitting in the center of the floor. But the floor was wrong. It was covered in symbols carved into the wood. Circles. Lines. Marks she had never seen before. In the chair sat a figure with its back turned to her. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. Mr. Harland whispered her name behind her, begging her to step back. But she walked inside. The air smelled like old paper and something metallic. Something sharp. The figure did not move. Eleanor took another step. Her candle flickered wildly as if it was struggling to stay alive. She whispered, "Hello." The figure slowly lifted its head. Not fully. Only slightly, enough for Eleanor to see a thin strand of long black hair slide down its shoulder. She felt her throat tighten. Mother. The figure did not turn around. It only breathed, a long shaky breath that sounded more like a cry for help. Eleanor stepped closer. She reached out her hand. The air around the figure felt heavy like thick mist. When her fingers touched the chair, the figure suddenly twisted its head halfway toward her in a movement too fast and too sharp to be human. Eleanor gasped and stumbled backward. The face that looked at her was not her mother. It was something wearing her mother's face. Something hollow. Something wrong. Its eyes were empty black circles. And when it opened its mouth, it whispered her name in her mother's voice. Eleanor. Her candle died. Darkness swallowed the room. And the door slammed shut behind her. Part 6. The room that breathed. Hook. Some rooms hold memories. Some rooms hold secrets. But the room behind the forbidden door did something far worse. It breathed. It listened. And when Eleanor stepped inside, it welcomed her like something that had been waiting for her since the day she was born. Eleanor stood in complete darkness. Her breath came fast and shallow. Her hands trembled as she tried to feel the air around her. It was thick and warm, almost like the room itself was alive. She pressed her back against the cold wall and whispered to herself. She tried to calm her heartbeat, but the silence only made it louder. Somewhere in the room, something moved. Eleanor swallowed hard. She remembered the face she had seen before the candle died. Or the thing wearing her mother's face. The empty eyes. The twisted jaw. The voice that sounded like her mother but felt like a memory stolen and used by something else. She whispered, "Who are you?" A voice answered from the darkness. It was soft and slow, like someone waking from a deep sleep. "Do you not know?" Eleanor froze. That voice. It sounded like her mother again, but then changed. It grew deeper, older. It sounded like many voices layered on top of each other. A crowd whispering through one mouth. She felt something brush against her arm. She jumped away quickly and pressed herself into the corner. Her fingers slid across the stone wall, searching desperately for the door. But the door felt farther than she remembered. As if the room had grown bigger. Eleanor heard slow footsteps coming toward her. Each step echoed like it traveled through a long empty tunnel. The figure moved without hurry, without pause. It moved with the confidence of something that knew she had nowhere to run. Eleanor whispered, "Please, stay away." The footsteps stopped. Then a cold hand touched her cheek. She felt ice spread down her jaw. She did not move. She did not breathe. The voice whispered, "You came to find the truth. Let me show you." In the next instant, a burst of light filled the room. It was not candlelight. It came from the walls themselves. The symbols carved into the floor glowed bright red. The stone walls shifted like they were made of soft clay. The entire room pulsed like a beating heart. Eleanor gasped. Her knees became weak. She grabbed the back of the chair in the center of the room and steadied herself. The figure stood inches from her. It now looked clear in the red glow. It wore her mother's dress. Her mother's hair. But the face was wrong. The skin stretched too tightly. The mouth was too wide. The eyes were two black circles filled with moving shadows. Eleanor backed away. What are you? The creature tilted its head. I am what your mother tried to protect you from. I am what she locked away. But the house chose you. And the house knows its own blood. Eleanor stared at it in shock. My mother never told me anything about this. She never said I was connected to it. The creature took a step closer. The floor symbols brightened under its feet. Your mother did not break the curse. She only delayed it. This house binds itself to one daughter in every generation. The door opens for only one. And now, it has opened for you. Eleanor felt her heart pounding in her chest. She shook her head. I am not part of this. I am not like you. The creature's expression changed. The shadows in its eyes swirled faster. It lifted its hand. When its fingers brushed the air, the walls shifted again. The stone stretched outward and formed shapes. Human shapes. Faces. Eleanor's stomach twisted. The walls were filled with faces pushing outward from inside the stone. Some cried. Some screamed. Some only stared with wide empty eyes. Their mouths opened and closed silently as if begging for release. The creature whispered, "These are the daughters who came before you. They tried to fight their fate. They tried to run. But the house keeps what belongs to it." The faces in the wall began to move. Their mouths opened wider. Eleanor covered her ears as a low moan filled the room. It grew louder. It grew sharper. It became a scream that shook the floor beneath her feet. Eleanor fell to her knees. Tears filled her eyes. Stop. Please. Stop. The creature lowered its head. You must join them. Or you must take my place. Only one can leave. Eleanor looked up slowly. Her hands shook, but a fire grew inside her eyes. I will not join them. I will not be part of this curse. The creature leaned in. Then you must take the chair. Eleanor turned her head. The wooden chair in the center of the room pulsed with the same red glow. She saw old claw marks on its arms. She saw dried blood on its seat. She saw strands of hair stuck in the cracks. A memory flashed in her mind. Her mother crying in the kitchen years ago. Her mother whispering about a door that must never open. Her mother shaking whenever lightning lit the hallway. Her mother staring at Eleanor's bedroom door each night as if expecting something to take her away. Eleanor whispered, "My mother sat here." Did she? The creature smiled slowly. A wide wrong smile. She tried. Eleanor felt something rise inside her. A mixture of anger and sorrow. She stood up. Her legs wobbled, but she stood strong. She said, "I am not afraid of you." The creature paused. The shadows inside its eyes flickered. Eleanor stepped forward. "You use fear as a weapon. But I will not be your prisoner. I will free them, every soul trapped in this room." The creature hissed. The entire room shook. The faces in the wall screamed louder. The symbols on the floor blazed with blinding light. The creature lunged toward her. Eleanor grabbed the chair and slammed it into the symbols on the floor. The wood cracked. Sparks of red light shot upward. The walls began to tear open like paper. Cold wind blasted through the room like a storm. The creature screamed in a voice made of many voices. "You do not know what you have done." Eleanor shouted over the roar of the collapsing room. "Yes, I do. I ended it." The floor split open. The walls crumbled. The faces began to fade like dust in the wind. The creature reached for her one last time, but its body dissolved into smoke. Eleanor ran toward the door. She grabbed the handle and pulled. It opened with a blast of cold air. She stumbled through it and fell into the hallway. Behind her, the forbidden room exploded with a flash of red light. Then everything went silent. Eleanor lay on the floor of the hallway, breathing hard. The door behind her now looked like any ordinary door. Old, wooden, harmless. But she knew the truth. It would not stay silent forever. If you'd like, I can write part 7, or prepare title, description, hashtags, and thumbnail text for the whole series. Part 7. Whispers in the Corridor. Hook. Some secrets cannot be buried. Some cries do not end. Eleanor thought the room was destroyed. She thought the curse was broken. But the house had learned. And it began to whisper. Eleanor walked down the hallway, her feet heavy as if the floor itself resisted her movement. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from what had happened in the forbidden room, but from the growing certainty that the house was awake now. It was listening, watching, waiting. The corridor stretched endlessly. Every door she passed seemed to shift slightly, as if breathing. Shadows crept along the walls, even though no one stood there. A faint murmuring filled the air, soft at first, almost like the wind. But then Eleanor realized it was voices, dozens of voices, low and urgent, speaking in languages she could not fully understand. She paused outside one of the smaller doors at the end of the hall. The whispers grew louder here. Eleanor pressed her ear against the wood. She caught fragments of sentences. A woman crying, a baby's first breath, someone begging for mercy. The voices froze suddenly, replaced by a single, deliberate whisper. Eleanor. Her stomach knotted. She looked around. The hallway was empty. Whoever, or whatever, spoke knew her name. A faint rustle came from the corner. Eleanor turned quickly, almost tripping over her own feet. There was nothing there, and yet, the air felt heavier, as if the house itself was leaning toward her, coaxing her forward. She reached the door and, against every instinct, turned the handle. It swung open smoothly, revealing a small room. A nursery. Dusty, decayed, and filled with empty cribs, but unmistakably a nursery. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the boarded windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Eleanor stepped inside. She could feel the whispers stronger now, closer, almost like they were surrounding her. She saw faint figures at the edges of her vision, small children, their forms barely there, faces pale and hollow. They reached out to her, their tiny hands trembling, mouths opening in silent cries. Eleanor swallowed hard. She understood now. The room she had destroyed was not the only one. The house had many rooms, each holding pieces of the same cruel secret. The sisters had not just hidden one generation, they had hidden many. Babies taken from mothers who had no voice. Children raised in wealth and comfort, never knowing where they came from. Women enslaved, forced to give life so the house could profit, and the cycle repeated. The whispers grew urgent, overlapping now, voices from every direction. Eleanor pressed her hands over her ears. Stop, please stop. But they would not. They demanded acknowledgement. They demanded release. A small figure appeared in the center of the room. A girl no older than 7, her hair tangled, dress torn. Her eyes were wide and black. She stepped toward Eleanor, reaching out. Eleanor knelt, whispering, "It's okay. I'm here. I will help." The girl spoke, her voice a tiny echo. "They took us. They keep taking." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. She understood. The curse had adapted. The house did not want destruction, it wanted continuation. Every attempt to break it only strengthened its hunger. Every scream, every stolen child, fed it. And now, after the forbidden room had been shattered, it had turned its attention fully to her. A sudden cold swept through the room. Eleanor's hair lifted. The cribs rattled as if unseen hands rocked them. The girl's form flickered, then multiplied. There were dozens of small, hollow-eyed children now, whispering, crying, reaching. Eleanor stood quickly. She needed a plan. She needed a way to stop this, but her mind raced and the hallway felt impossibly far. Then she remembered the ledgers, the books that documented every child, every mother, every sale. If she could find them, she could expose the sisters' crimes, even if the house tried to bury the evidence again. The nursery door slammed behind her, hard enough to shake the walls. The whispers turned into a chorus of angry voices. Eleanor ran down the corridor, taking doors two at a time, searching desperately for the convent's archives. She found the library first, filled with religious texts, prayers, and old manuscripts. Dust thickened the air, but there, in the far corner, sat a locked cabinet. The lock was rusted but fragile. Eleanor forced it open with all her strength. Inside were rows of neatly stacked books. Ledgers. Names and dates written in careful, precise script. She opened the first one. Her stomach turned. There they were. Entries for every child taken, every mother who had been brought to the penitent house, every transaction. $200 each. Blessed adoptions. Christian mercy. The writing dripped with false righteousness. Eleanor flipped through the books feverishly. Each page confirmed what she already knew. The horror was meticulous, methodical, every detail recorded. The sisters had not acted out of charity, they acted out of calculation, greed, and cruelty. The whispers followed her into the library, louder now, almost accusatory. She clutched the ledgers to her chest. I will show them. I will make them pay. A shadow crossed the room. The figure of Mother Superior appeared at the doorway, gray eyes cold and unblinking. She moved without sound, but the presence filled the space. The whispers quieted at her approach, replaced by a single voice, low, dangerous. Eleanor felt her courage falter, but she held the ledgers high. I know what you've done. The world will know. Mother Superior tilted her head. The world, this world, you do not understand. The house has always protected us. It will protect us again. You cannot fight it. The ground beneath Eleanor shook. Books toppled from shelves, crumbling to dust. The shadows in the corners thickened, coalescing into something massive, something that filled the library with its presence. The house itself seemed alive now, bending reality, swallowing light. Eleanor backed away, clutching the ledgers tightly. She had no choice. She had to run. She had to survive. And she had to expose this, somehow, someway. The whispers became screams. The children's voices begged her to flee. Their eyes, so many hollow eyes, implored her. Eleanor took a deep breath and ran toward the stairwell, the ledgers pressed to her chest. She could hear the Mother Superior's laughter echoing behind her. It was not a sound of joy. It was a sound of hunger. As she ran, Eleanor realized the truth. The house would never stop. The curse was old, powerful, and patient. But perhaps she could outlast it, perhaps she could leave, perhaps she could tell the story. The library door slammed behind her. The whispers followed her into the stairwell, but Eleanor did not look back. She climbed, 2 steps at a time, until she reached the attic, a place she had never been before. Here, the air was still. The shadows were less sharp. And at the far end, a window opened to the moonlight. Outside lay freedom, the river glinting like silver in the night. Eleanor hesitated for only a moment. Then she leapt. If you want, I can continue with part 8 next, keeping the suspense escalating and the horror historic tension strong for YouTube storytelling. Do you want me to continue with part 8 now? Part 8. Shadows that follow. Hook. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some secrets, once discovered, follow you into the night. Eleanor hit the ground hard, the ledgers pressed to her chest. The cool night air shocked her senses, but she did not stop. Her lungs burned as she scrambled over roots and mud, the river glinting faintly ahead, promising escape, freedom, a chance to live beyond the house's reach. Behind her, the convent loomed, black and silent against the sky. Yet Eleanor could feel it watching. She could hear whispers carried on the wind, not soft this time, but insistent, relentless. The voices of the women, the children, the house itself, they were behind her, urging, warning, pleading. The ledgers felt heavier with every step, but Eleanor refused to drop them. They were proof, evidence that could expose the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy for what they truly were. But proof alone would not save her. She had to reach the river. Suddenly, the shadows along the path thickened. Trees twisted in impossible ways, their branches reaching like fingers. Eleanor stumbled, her foot catching on a root. She fell to her knees, her hands scraping against the earth. The air shimmered, and for a moment she thought she saw small figures flitting between the trees. Children, women, she could not be sure. A cold wind struck her from the side. Eleanor turned sharply. Mother Superior stood there, impossibly tall, her gray eyes glowing in the moonlight. She moved without sound, gliding across the ground as though she were part of the night itself. Eleanor scrambled backward. Keep moving, she told herself. Keep moving. But the convent had taught her fear. Fear had been her constant companion since she entered the penitent house. And now, fear was alive, taking form, chasing her through the darkness. Mother Superior raised a hand. The whispers erupted into screams, deafening, overwhelming. Eleanor clutched the ledgers tighter, pressing them to her chest as if they could shield her. She stumbled forward again, toward the river. Her legs burned, her arms ached, but she refused to look back. The riverbank was close now. She could smell the water, feel the cool mist rising from its surface. Freedom was so near she could almost touch it. But then the ground beneath her shifted. A hand, or something that felt like a hand, grasped her ankle. Eleanor fell flat, the ledgers slipping from her grasp. She twisted, fighting, but the grip was strong, cold, unyielding, and then she heard the voice of a child, faint but clear. "Eleanor, help us." Her heart ached. She recognized the voices now, the countless cries of those taken, those lost, those trapped by the convent. Eleanor forced herself to her feet, tearing away from whatever held her. She grabbed the ledgers and ran again. The river was at her feet. She paused, gasping, the water rippling under the moonlight. For a moment, she thought she was safe. She lowered herself into the river, letting the current carry her away from the shadows, away from the house, away from Mother Superior. But the house was patient. As Eleanor floated downstream, she saw shapes along the banks. Figures of women and children, pale and hollow, standing silently, watching her. The water carried her further, but the whispers never stopped. They followed her, a low hum in her mind, echoing every stolen childhood, every mother's grief, every lie told in the name of God. By dawn, Eleanor reached a small settlement outside the parish. Muddy, exhausted, soaked to the bone, she staggered into a doctor's office. The man looked up in surprise. "You look like you've been through hell," he said. "What happened?" Eleanor opened her mouth, but the words caught. How could she explain the horror of the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy? How could she describe the penitent house, the women, the babies, the ledgers? The world had always turned a blind eye to suffering like hers. And now, after everything she had witnessed, she was alone. But she had the ledgers. She held them tightly. Evidence, truth, a chance to make the world see. The doctor, noticing her state, offered food and warmth. Eleanor sat by the fire, trying to catch her breath. And as she warmed her hands, she realized something terrifying. The whispers were quieter here, yes, but they had not left. They were in her head now, carried in memory and blood. The house had not abandoned her. It had followed. She would have to live with it, carry it, bear it, until she found a way to expose the truth. Days passed. Eleanor slowly recovered, but she could not rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cribs, the women bending over cotton fields, the small bundles of infants carried away. She knew she could not remain hidden. She had to act. She found allies in the settlement, people who had heard rumors about the convent, about strange disappearances, about women who arrived and were never seen again. Eleanor showed them the ledgers, explaining the system the sisters had created. They gasped in horror, some skeptical, some angry. But Eleanor did not falter. She knew the truth was undeniable. Word began to spread. Letters were written, the ledgers copied. People whispered, then spoke louder, then demanded justice. Eleanor realized the sisters' power was rooted in secrecy, in fear, in the illusion of holiness. Expose the secret, and the power crumbled. But the house was not done. One night, Eleanor awoke to cold wind rushing through her cabin. Shadows moved across the walls, twisting, reaching, whispering. The children, the mothers, the penitent house. She felt them all, pressing against her mind, reminding her that the suffering was not over, that the curse had not ended. Eleanor sat up, shivering. "I will not forget you," she whispered. "I will make them know. And even if the house follows me to the ends of the earth, I will tell the story." The shadows retreated slightly, as if listening, judging, acknowledging. And Eleanor knew this was just the beginning. The Sisters of Perpetual Mercy might still walk in daylight, their faces calm, their eyes cold. But Eleanor held the truth. And in truth, there was power. The river had carried her away, but it had not washed away the responsibility she now bore. She was the witness. She was the voice of those who had none. And she would speak. The house waited, patient as ever. But Eleanor had learned one thing. Courage, once ignited, cannot be extinguished, no matter how many shadows rise against it. If you want, I can continue with part 9, where Eleanor takes the next steps to expose the convent and confront the lingering horrors, building to the final climax for Part 10. Do you want me to continue with Part 9 now? Here's Part 9 of your horror historic story series, written for American YouTube audiences, easy English, around 1,000 words, engaging hook, without dashes. Part 9. The whispers become shouts. Hook. Some truths cannot stay buried. Some horrors demand to be heard. Eleanor had been on the run for weeks, but running no longer felt like survival. It felt like denial. Each night, the whispers haunted her dreams. The babies, the mothers, the cries of the penitent house, they followed her, growing louder, insistent, accusing. She knew she could not hide from the past or from the convent's shadow. She made her way to New Orleans, careful to avoid roads frequented by parish priests or plantation overseers. The city was a maze of narrow streets and crowded docks, but it offered anonymity, a chance to reach ears willing to listen. Eleanor carried the ledgers. Like a shield, her only weapon against disbelief and power. The first person she approached was a journalist, a man named Lucien Boudreau. He had written a series on corruption in religious institutions, exposing scandals that other men of the cloth had buried. Eleanor knocked at his office door, breathless, mud-stained, exhausted. "I have proof," she said, holding out the ledgers. "Proof of the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy. Proof of what they are doing to women and children." Lucien raised an eyebrow, skeptical but curious. He took the ledgers, flipping through them carefully. He looked up, pale. This is, he could not finish the sentence. "Yes," Eleanor said, "every child, every mother, every transaction, $200 for each infant. And no one knows, because they are kept invisible. I cannot speak for them. I cannot speak for anyone else. I can only give you this." Lucien nodded slowly. "We will make them listen. But you must be careful. Powerful men protect the convent. The church will not be pleased." Eleanor understood the risk, but fear had lost its grip. The cries of the penitent house were stronger than any threat. The following weeks were a blur of letters, meetings, and secret visits. Eleanor recounted every detail she could remember. Lucien published the first article with care, disguising some names to avoid immediate retribution, but the story spread like wildfire. The city was shocked. Wealthy families whispered in parlors. Parishioners demanded explanations. Rumors reached plantations, where overseers and masters feared exposure. Yet, in the convent, the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy carried on as if nothing had changed. Their calm was a mask, their composure deliberate. Eleanor could not rest. Each day, she felt the weight of the women and children who remained trapped behind the convent walls. She knew the ledgers alone would not be enough to end the suffering. The penitent house had to be opened, its doors forced wide so the world could see. She returned to the outskirts of St. Augustine Parish, disguised as a laborer. The convent had not changed. Its iron balconies gleamed in the sun. The chapel bells rang at precise intervals. But Eleanor knew the truth beneath the surface. Night fell, and she moved silently through the woods. Shadows stretched long and thin, but she was not afraid. Not anymore. Every step toward the convent was a step toward justice. She reached the side of the building where the penitent house stood. The windows were dark, the air thick with the scent of laundry, sweat, and something Eleanor could not name: fear, sorrow, and restraint. She pressed her ear to the door. A cry pierced the night. Not loud, not desperate, but a sound that shattered silence. A baby. A mother calling, though her words were muffled. Eleanor's heart pounded. She had to enter, had to see, had to free them. The door was locked, of course. Eleanor had anticipated this. She produced a small set of tools she had acquired in New Orleans. Time was against her, but she worked methodically. Every second felt like an eternity. The lock gave with a faint click. Eleanor pushed the door open. Inside, the room smelled of human suffering. Shadows flickered in the corners. A dozen women, some heavily pregnant, some pale from overwork, turned to her in shock. Eleanor raised her hands. "I am here to help," she whispered. "You are not forgotten." The women looked at her, disbelief and hope mingling in their eyes. One of the older women, Hannah, stepped forward. Eleanor recognized her immediately. We thought no one would come, Hannah said. We thought the world had forgotten us. Eleanor led the women and children into the courtyard, where the moonlight spilled over the earth. She whispered instructions, calming the crying babies, helping the mothers gather blankets and food. She felt their fear, their desperation, but also their fragile trust in her. Then a bell rang. Not the convent bell, but another sound, metal on metal, sharp and threatening. Eleanor froze. Footsteps approached rapidly. Mother Superior appeared, her eyes cold, but her face calm. The sisters followed, a small army in black, shadows moving like ghosts. Eleanor stepped forward, holding the ledgers high. These are your crimes, she said. Every child taken, every mother enslaved, every secret sold as mercy. The world knows now. Mother Superior's lips pressed together. She did not speak. Her silence was louder than any scream. Lucian's men arrived, hidden until the right moment. Parishioners, armed with curiosity and outrage, followed Eleanor's signals. The convent was surrounded. No escape, no quiet hiding of sins. Inside, the women and children began to cry, not from fear, but from relief. Relief that someone remembered them, relief that someone acted, relief that the shadow over their lives had a crack in it, a way to let light in. Eleanor looked at the ledgers, the women, the children. She realized something chilling. The convent had thrived on secrecy, on silence, on fear. Now that the world was listening, the power shifted. But she also knew the battle was far from over. Laws could be bent, priests could defend, the powerful could try to silence the truth again. The Sisters of Perpetual Mercy were clever, patient, and ruthless. Eleanor felt a whisper in her mind, faint, like the brush of a ghost's fingers. Thank you, it said. The voices of the penitent house were inside her now, a permanent echo. She would carry them with her, fight for them, speak for them. And she would not rest until every last child, every last mother, every last hidden secret was revealed. The world had begun to listen. The shadows had begun to speak. And Eleanor knew that when the final dawn came, the truth would not be stopped. If you want, I can create part 10, the final part, giving a powerful and chilling conclusion to the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy story for your YouTube audience, tying all threads together. Do you want me to create part 10 now? Part 10. The fire that revealed everything. Hook. Some secrets burn quietly. Some horrors wait for flames to reveal the truth. March 1856 was bitter and wet in St. Augustine Parish. A chill hung over the cypress-lined river, and the convent of the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy seemed as serene as it had for decades. But the calm was a mask. No one inside the convent suspected that the fire would expose everything. It began in the east wing, near the storage room, where candles burned too close to dry timber. Smoke curled along the ceiling before anyone realized how quickly it spread. Sister Josephine screamed, but her voice was lost in the roar of crackling wood. Mother Superior Celeste Beaumont tried to command order. Gather the women, save the children, but the fire moved faster than anyone. The nuns fled into the night, dragging sheets and crucifixes. Outside, the parish watched in horror as flames licked the balconies and windows. It was chaos, and in the chaos, the truth escaped with it. The fire destroyed the east wing, but some ledgers were tossed aside in the panic. They were damp, edges burned, but the ink had survived. These records, long hidden from the public, documented 14 years of what the sisters called blessed adoptions. 87 children, every one born within those walls. Every mother a woman trapped in the penitent house. Marguerite Bellamy, now 23, had returned to St. Augustine after years of study. She had never forgotten what she had seen, what she had tried to reveal. The fire gave her an opportunity she could not ignore. She arrived at the convent the morning after the blaze. Smoke hung in the air, a bitter reminder of what had been lost. But the charred ledgers told a story that words alone could never convey. Names, dates, payments, everything that had been hidden from the parish now lay exposed. Eleanor was there too, older now, her resolve hardened by years of seeing the world turn away from injustice. She had brought women from nearby towns, women who had escaped the penitent house and plantation life. Together, they began reading the ledgers aloud. Every woman's name was there. Every child recorded, every transaction noted. The parish priest, Father Antoine Dufresne, who had signed the birth certificates, was listed as witness. Families who had paid the $200 for a child appeared in the ledgers. The air was heavy with shock. Parishioners could not believe what they were hearing. The sisters had fooled them for years, hiding cruelty behind charity, trapping women behind iron doors while selling their children under the guise of Christian mercy. Ruth, now 43, emerged from the shadows of the crowd. She had lived decades with the pain of losing her child. The memory of the penitent house burned into her mind. Seeing the ledgers, hearing the women read their names, she finally felt validation. Her suffering had been real, undeniable, documented. The sisters had tried to flee. Some were caught in the fire, others escaped into the night. Mother Superior Beaumont was taken into custody by parish officials. She was silent, unrepentant, her eyes icy. She did not cry, did not protest. She had ruled the convent with strict order for years, and now the law would decide her fate. Marguerite stepped forward to address the crowd, her voice steady. These women were silenced for decades. Their children were taken from them, their lives controlled by lies. The church allowed this, protected it. No longer. Today, the truth burns brighter than fire. The parish listened, stunned, unable to speak. Some turned away in disbelief. Some wept. Some whispered prayers, unsure whether to curse or forgive. But the ledgers, charred but legible, spoke louder than any sermon. Investigations followed. Families who had received children were contacted, and some revealed that they had never been told the truth. Many children had grown up believing they were orphans, never knowing their mothers lived and suffered just miles away. The realization shook the community to its core. Ruth walked the grounds of the burned convent. Every corner, every path held memories of labor, suffering, and loss. But she felt a sense of release. The world now knew. The fire had not only consumed wooden walls, it had destroyed the sisters' power to hide behind lies. Hannah, Lydia, Esther, and the others, women whose lives had been stolen, stood beside her. They were older, scarred, but free in a way they had never been. For the first time, their voices mattered. They could speak, and someone would listen. Marguerite organized the women into a committee, ensuring that every surviving child of the penitent house would have a chance to reconnect with their birth mother if possible. Records were shared with authorities, historians, and families, finally bringing accountability to a system that had evaded it for so long. The parish never looked at the convent the same way again. What had been a symbol of faith became a reminder of corruption, cruelty, and the cost of silence. Children were remembered, mothers were honored, and the fire that had destroyed the walls became the spark of justice. Eleanor, Ruth, and Marguerite stood together in the courtyard one evening, watching the sun set over the Atchafalaya River. The water, once dark and murky, seemed to carry a new light. They had survived horrors that would haunt others, but they had turned grief into action, pain into power, and secrecy into truth. And in that moment, they understood that while cruelty can persist in shadows, it cannot withstand the persistence of those determined to speak, to reveal, and to fight for what is right. The story of the Sisters of Perpetual Mercy would never be forgotten. The ledgers, the letters, and the memories of women like Ruth and Hannah would endure. The fire had done what silence never could. It had forced the world to look, listen, and reckon. If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more historical horror tales, share it with friends who love dark history, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice helps these stories survive.